Welcome to this episode of the Sports Detective Podcast Show. My name is James Williams, and today we are talking about Utah football, and I am joined by JT Wistrasill, who is the host of the Locked On Utes podcast. And JT, I wanted to start here because I'm starting to get the buzz from people that are covering the Big 12 that are saying, like, hey, Utah, we thought that they were going to be a team that was going to be a perennial contender in this conference when they joined. Last year was disappointing, and the bus is starting to turn around where the over-under was 7.5, which I was pretty shocked by. Other than the fact that, you look back at last year and you say, hey, the season went wrong because Cam Rising was hurt and didn't play. What other than the quarterback being different this year for Utah is going to make this season different than last year?
I think one thing that you are obviously, look, I'm just going to tell you what it is, James. Quarterback being the biggest thing by far. Look at this Utah team, all those close one-score games. It came down to quarterback play more than anything else. But there are other things that Utah has going for them, and appreciate you having me on to discuss this Utah football team because I do think it's going to be a big season for Utah. It extends beyond the quarterback position. It's also offensive coordinator. Andy Ludwig, Utah's old offensive coordinator. They won both their Pac-12 titles with him. I think he did a great job, but we see this a lot in every level of coaching. Eventually, the game passes you by. I felt like Andy Ludwig's offense was at times just not creative enough. And I feel like that you need creativity in order to succeed in college football. They also just very complex. Like it took quarterbacks years to learn. And then you see Isaac Wilson, you have to turn to a true freshman because your quarterback development failed last year. And thus your team fails and you don't make a bowl game for the first time in what feels like forever. So for Utah, getting a new offensive coordinator in, Jason Beck comes in. He's a guy who was New Mexico's offensive coordinator last year. He led the fourth best offense on a yards per game basis a season ago with the Lobos. He gets his quarterback in Devin Dampier as well, too. So really excited about that combination there. Also, Utah's offensive line. I mean, we're talking about two offensive tackles, Spencer Fano, Caleb Lomu, both right now, James, projected first-round picks this upcoming year. There's also a pretty good offensive line last year. All five starters back. I think it's a top 10 unit in the country. Some people have said it's top 5, top 3. I've even heard a few say the best offensive line in all of college football in Salt Lake City. So that offensive line is going to be strong. Run game should be good. And Utah's defense, even in a down year last year, James, still second in the Big 12. With the offense going 3 and out after 3 and out, there's all that pressure on the defense. They're still holding a litany of good Big 12 quarterbacks to under 20 points a game. That's what Utah gave up last year, 20 points per game with all that pressure on them. You get a lot of key contributors from last year's defense back. A winning culture with Kyle Whittingham still is enabled with this Utah team. So many close losses last year. Now that the quarterback position is improved, there's a lot of reason to believe that Utah is going to be much improved and a Big 12 title contender this season.
So I want to talk a little bit more about the offensive line because I'm just being a little bit cynical. I've done a lot of these previews and I feel like I've just been too nice. So I'm starting to get I'm trying to push back a little bit more. I know about the offensive tackles. I know how you just said that they're going to be potentially the best case scenario is first round NFL draft picks, which is, really saying something with their, just their talent and they're just their size and physicality. But this Utah team last year still was not able to like run the ball. I know you said, didn't really develop the quarterback position at all. Should I still be skeptical that, just nothing on the offense worked? Or is it really something too, where it's like, the skill positions and then the offensive coordinator were just kind of like, a really big weak spot last year?
I mean, massive weak spots, right? There's really almost no receiver from last year's team is back. There's one guy there in Zipper. I think he could make an impact. Even he was a true freshman from a season ago. So I really think the offensive coordinator that Utah's bringing in, the quarterback they're bringing in, when you talk about Devin Dampier, he's the only quarterback in college football last season who rushed for over 1,000 and threw for over 2,500. There's some other stats we can get into with him, why I feel like he is ready to make the P4 jump. And I think he's going to have a monster season coming up this year. But yeah, Utah had a good offensive line last year, but the biggest problem was Utah just could not throw the ball. Like Isaac Wilson's QBR was in the 130th something range. Like it was brutal. Utah had no pass game, so teams were loading up the box too. And even like when Wilson would get sacked, it's like he's holding on to the ball too long. It was just a really bad combination. So Utah has really done a good job of being aggressive, going out there, upgrading their skill position talent. They got a receiver in, Tobias Merriweather from Cal. He's a former 4-star. He's at Notre Dame and went to Cal. Trying to put it all together, but the report's been very good so far. 6'5", 200 pounds. And this is a Utah team that hasn't always gotten the best production from their receivers, and they found ways to win. They win because of their physical brand of football, and it feels like in 25 they're going to get back to that, especially on the offensive side of the ball. They also got Wayshawn Marker, a transfer running back from Washington State. He's a true freshman last year, over 700 yards with the Cougars, and he's going to have a really strong season too. And this offensive line, and I will say James as well. There's a reason when I talk about Utah's offensive line, I say top 10 unit. I'm not someone who says they're the number one in college football. Because to me, I need to continue to see improvement out of the interior offensive line. Jaron Cup, the center, Michael Mokapisi, right guard, and Tanoa Tongai, the left guard. All of those guys need to continue to improve. Jaron Cump's been a guy they've shuffled around in multiple positions. He's still trying to figure out the center spot. He was still good last year, but needs to take another level. Same thing with Mokapisi to me and Tongai as well. So you have guys that are doing good things, but they need to take that next step. But there's a lot of reason to believe that they can when you look at just more experience, more continuity up front, and a Utah team that is very motivated. After what last year was supposed to be Kyle Whittingham's last year, the goal is to win a Big 12 title, make history, and send Kyle Whittingham out on top the way that Utah wanted to last year.
Is that the expectation? Because I was going to ask that later. Is that the expectation that this will be Kyle Whittingham's last year?
It is. Yeah, I think it was last year as well, too, because it's been reported now that it was supposed to be his last year. It was planned to be his final year, and Kyle Whittingham is like the ultimate competitor. He was refusing to go out like he did last year. Utah has already named their head coach in waiting, Morgan Scalley, their defensive coordinator. So this is something where it's like we're getting close to the end. At last year's Big 12 Media Day, when asked like how much longer he's going to be, or actually he wasn't even asked. He was asked a question about Vegas, but he dropped a line about how he probably won't be sitting in this chair come the Vegas game in 2027. So the fact that you're even talking about acknowledging retirement shows he's getting close to the end. And I do feel like that he would have hung it up last year had Utah had a better season. But 5-7, it's just too bad. Like for a coach as legendary as Utah, I understand why he didn't want to go out in such a fashion. And I think that the goal is this year, have a strong year and go out. Because also it's been reported that Utah's defensive coordinator, Morgan Scalley, like he wants to take over. He's tired of waiting. He was told that last year was going to be the last year. So it's another year of waiting for him. So the expectation, the hope is Kyle Whittingham, strong year this year, then exit there. I would be interested to see what happened if Utah had a similar season to last year, maybe just marred by injuries, 5-7 again. Like Utah's defensive coordinators had some good offers. He's left more money on the table, like from a place like USC, to stay at Utah. So then does he decide to leave if Kyle tries to come back again? It becomes very complicated. But I do believe this will be Kyle's last year. And I just feel like it's time. He's had a lot of success for Utah, but some of the changes for college football are starting to irritate and catch up with him. I mean, he still doesn't let the media watch like anything of fall camp related. He's not putting out depth charts. I don't think he loves the whole injury report thing. So he's still a really good coach, but I just feel like we're winding it down here. And I think it's best if him and Utah after this season move forward with the future. And that's Morgan Scalley.
So let's talk a little bit about Morgan Scalley then, because he has been a longtime assistant at Utah. I believe he's been there 17 years or so. You just said that he's been, turning down offers, turning down, more money to be a defensive coordinator at other positions, at other places. I'm sure he's probably gotten head coaching offers at other places too. Why has he been pinpointed to be the successor to Kyle Whittingham? Is that a Whittingham decision? Is that just a Utah, athletic department decision? Why him?
I think it's all parties involved. It's like when you have someone who's had as much success as Morgan Scalley has, do you want to risk him going out the window? Also, when you've built a culture like Utah has, one that has consistently won the Big 12, or won the Pac-12 and now hoping the Big 12, right? Like, do you want to restart with a new guy who comes in? I personally wouldn't, and Utah doesn't either. They think they got something special in Morgan Scalley as a head coach. It's clear they have something special in him as a defensive coordinator. I mean, look at what Utah and Morgan Scalley was leading the charge in those games did to Caleb Williams. Both times they played them, right? He had master game plans that he came up with that helped limit that Trojans offense, that helped Utah come back and win those games. He's just a really good defensive coordinator. He put up incredible performances, and Utah's have produced good personnel, right? But it is more than anything. I do think Morgan and that staff and the growth and the development that they do that has helped Utah football, along with Kyle Whittingham, develop his reputation as a hard-nosed, tough, physical team. I mean, defense can still win championships, right? Utah is evident to that. They won 2 Pac-12 titles with Morgan as a defensive coordinator. And even before that, this team has just always had a strong defense. Just something you know about Utah year in and year out. You're not used to seeing Utah when they're down here last year, right? It's because of the offense. The defense is never really down. Down for the defense is top 5 instead of top 3, I feel like. So that's what we're talking about when this Utah defense is. Morgan is just one of those guys that He's got the tenacity. He's got the fire. He's got the passion. Because of what you had going with Kyle Whittingham, you want to continue that culture, continue that success. Morgan is different from Kyle Whittingham, but has a lot of the similarities of, okay, I've learned from him. Now I can take what I've learned from him and my own style of coaching, and I think carry Utah into the next echelon, basically. I look at it like this. Do I think that he's going to be Ryan Day? When Ohio State moved on, well, Urban Meyer, that whole situation. But they went to Ryan Day. Why? Because Ryan Day is a genius of an offensive mind. To me, I don't think Morgan Scott is going to win national championships at Utah, but I don't think you would want that guy to go out the door because I think the ceiling that he can reach at Utah, I just don't expect there to be much of a drop-off based on what we know about Morgan, the type of leader and coach he is.
Okay, that's a pretty good sell job. Let's switch back to the offense, though, because obviously, like we said, last year was an absolute disaster. That was the side of the ball that was holding the team back. Utah goes ahead and they get Devin Dampier, who we talked about, the transfer quarterback from New Mexico, but they also go and get his offensive coordinator at New Mexico, Jason Beck. Can you tell me a little bit about Jason Beck and what kind of offense he's going to be running at Utah this year?
Yeah, a little bit more of a spread style too, but Utah's also, they're really going to maximize the run. I mean, when you have an offensive line like Utah does, and I talked a little bit about Devin Dampier, but here's what else he did. He led college football on a yards per carry basis last year at 7.5. He was tied for first, according to Pro Football Focus, in quarterback missed tackles, forced missed tackles last year. So incredibly elusive too. So Utah probably spread it out, aired out a little more too, but this offense is still going to be so much based on the run because you have such a dual and dynamic quarterback. Devin Dampier, James as well, only sacked 5 times last year. And he went against like a couple of P4 teams too. Like if he was sacked in just those games 5 times, it would have been understandable. He's just such an elusive athlete that Utah wants to do everything they can to maximize him. They are going to let him run. Even though he's only 5'10", he is very slippery, so it's hard to get those big hits on him. You got that. I mentioned the running back, Wayshawn Parker, too. So Utah will spread it out, air it out a little bit more. I think there will be lots of things, too, to try to get the ball out quick as well, try to capitalize on. Hey, Devin Dampier is obviously not one of the top 10 like pocket quarterbacks in college football. Sit there and dial you up. He threw 12 interceptions last year. He's got to improve on that. But because he's so good on the ground, he still had over 30 touchdowns last year. He had 19 on the ground this season to go. Utah's not going to change him that much and be like, oh, you have to be this. They're going to let Devin Dampier be Devin Dampier. His Utah offense is going to be better because of it. Jason Beck knows how to use him. They know how to work together. It's going to be a physical attack. I think the run-to-pass ratio, even though Kyle Whittingham was quoted earlier today, talk about how he wants it to be as close to 50-50 as it can. I don't see how it's not 60-40 with the run when you have the strength of this team being offensive line, quarterback, I believe running back too. I expect big things from Utah on the ground, and I do think they can do enough through the air when you look at the potential with Devin Dampier. This is a guy to me, the skill set, even comes in some of his interceptions, like were drops and things of that nature. I feel like he's ready. When you watch him play, and I know there's been quarterbacks who failed going from G5 to P4, but there's also been some that have had success as well. You know, Curtis Rourke from last season as well. I even like what Arkansas's quarterback was able to do last season too. Diego Pavia is another one. So it's not like just because, you know, Jaquan Finn didn't work at Baylor last year. I don't think Devin Dampier is going to be Jaquan Finn. I think he's going to be the latest G5 success story. And it's because of the familiar with the offensive coordinator and the fact that he's just going to have a ton of time back there thanks to that offensive line. Plus his elusiveness, I'm expecting a big bounce back from this Utah offense. They were dreadful a season ago. I think they got a great shot to be in the top 6 as a total offense in this conference because of that offensive line and Devin Dampier's abilities.
So this is a different type of like transfer portal additions than like a lot of other schools that you see, because a lot of times with other schools, as you get doing a lot of these previews and you read a lot of these previews, a lot of times it's like, oh my God, we were bad at that position. Let's kick everyone out of there. And then we'll bring in a whole bunch of new people. And it's like you're kind of, a lot of teams will have a new, let's say a new offense, but there's a lot of different new pieces. There's a new coach, there's a new quarterback, there's a new left tackle, there's a new tight end. The weird thing with this Utah team is kind of we've been talking about here. Dampier and Jason Beck have their connection from New Mexico. As you were mentioning earlier, the whole offensive line is back. So there is continuity with this Utah team, but new running back, new skill position players. Is there a little bit of a concern that it might take, 2-3 weeks into the season for this team to really start to gel and get that chemistry built up?
Absolutely. I think Devin Dampier as well, like just going against P4 defenses week in and week out. I'm confident in his ability to improve and get there, but is he going to walk into the Rose Bowl, Pasadena, week one,
Yep.
the nightcap, UCLA, and just light it up and throw for over 300 yards. I don't see that. I think it's likely he has a couple interceptions in that game as he tries to adjust. But I think it's nice for Utah that you go take on a UCLA team that is, I mean, you want to talk about transfer portal pieces and new, there is just so much new with that UCLA team. It's hard to project. And I think Utah, even though there is some new pieces there, they just have more continuity. So that's why I feel good about them. Then after that, you get Cal Poly and Wyoming. So just nice ramp-up games before you get into a gauntlet of a Big 12 schedule. But there's absolutely concerns with the wide receiver core. I mean, Utah probably has a bottom 3 wide receiver group in the Big 12 right now. So if the game like fell on their shoulders for some reason, that could be hard. And that's why I talk about one of the reasons I'm higher on that group making plays is because even if they don't win right away, it's just really hard to take down Devin Dampier. I think he's going to be able to buy time and make something happen where those guys can adjust. Utah did add Ryan Davis, who was a receiver last year at New Mexico, who had over 700 yards with Dampier. So having that familiarity, I think, is a nice thing that helps too. But yeah, you need this wide receiver core to continue to step up and improve. I think they have enough guys in it that can do just enough. Also, just a very brief defensive concern. Utah lost a ton on the defensive line. There's some good players coming back for them, and I think it's a Utah defensive line, right? They've earned the benefit of the doubt of being able to produce. But that doesn't change the fact that no one on that D-line has had over 5 sacks in a college football season or been a dominant pass rusher on the interior or on the outside. So I do have some questions on 3rd and long. Can Utah get after the quarterback without bringing a blitz? And you got to be able to get home against some of the really good quarterbacks you're going to face in the Big 12 too. This Utah team definitely has some questions, but the continuity they have coming back and some of the strength in key spots, I believe will allow them to overcome it and I think make a push that could lead to them ending up in Arlington this season.
I want to talk a little bit about the rivalry with BYU. I think it's something, if you haven't really dove into and read a little bit about it or talked to somebody that is a fan of either side about it, you really don't know how intense of a rivalry this is. I remember talking to Jake Hatch a few years ago, and he was telling me about how he never thought that there'd be a time where Utah and BYU would ever be in the same conference again. It was that heated of a rivalry. Why is it that, just kind of tell me some of the origins of this rivalry and kind of why, it just seems so heated? Because it seems like it's obviously a very heated rivalry on the field, but why is it there is just a lot of heat, it seems like, off the field?
I think sometimes there's the pushback from the church element, right, to, the Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, on that side of things, the Mormon religion. And there are Utah fans who are absolutely a part of that too, right? But I think in the fan base, sometimes Utah will get hit with the stigma that everyone from there is of that religion. So I think there are just some Utah fans that really push back against that too. But I just really think it's a lot of the religious stuff of why you see it be so heated and so animated, and why some sides there's that disagreement, and one side thinks they're better than others or not. And as I said, there are people of the faith that go to BYU a lot, obviously, and then there's some that go to Utah as well too. But I do think that's one of the biggest things you see. It is just that difference in people from Utah going in the opposite direction than what a BYU does basically there. Also, proximity, of course, always plays a role in it. I mean, you can get to each campus in an hour, so you get really passionate fan bases there too. It's a great history, lots of close games throughout the rivalry as well. And I mean, this is something that it's 365. I mean, you can do a video on Utah BYU and people are going to tune in and they're going to be going at it in the comments because that is the history of this rivalry. It's heated, it's passionate, and everyone picks a side. It really isn't. So there are some people who are like, hey, I want Utah and BYU to win, but for the most part, it's one or the other. I think it's one of the best rivalries in college sports, though. I think overall it's healthy. There's some unhealthy parts of it overall, but I do think for the most part it is a rivalry that it brings out the best in college football. I think it's a top 10 rivalry in sport, honestly, too. I wish it got more national attention. Utah's trying to do the Red River rivalry thing, but obviously it's not big enough to be that because it's not on rivalry weekend. I wish the Big 12 would move it there and try to make it like the nightcap to the day after you get done with Ohio State and Texas. And I'm now Ohio State, Texas. That's week one. Ohio State, Michigan. And then later on that night, after the Iron Bowl. I would love it if that was the rivalry game. But yeah, so it's just one of those things. There's so many deep-rooted reasons for this rivalry, but it really is the differences on each side. And even though a lot of people are family, when it comes to this rivalry, it is on. It's fun to be a part of, and I'm excited they're back in the conference playing every year because I love the passion.
Yeah, and it also helps too when both teams are really good.
Yeah.
And they both have like really good coaches, because you went from BYU there where you had Bronco Mendenhall for a stretch, and then you've obviously had Kalani Sitake, who it's like, it seems like every time like I've doubted Kalani Sitake, like he has like a year like he does last year, and you're like, oh wait, he's actually like a really good coach. We shouldn't doubt him as much as we probably did. But that's kind of a sneaky thing about the Big 12 is the Big 12 has a lot of very good coaches. BYU this year, I'm going to sidetrack you a little bit. They obviously have Retzloff, who ends up leaving the team. And then now BYU announced their starting quarterback, who is wearing the number 47, and his name is Bear. Those are the only two facts I know about him. What do you know about him?
Well, but yeah, he's a true freshman. I mean, and he didn't even spend spring ball with BYU. James, I don't know this for a fact, but like, if you were given number 47, do we really think BYU thought he was going to win the job? No, they thought it was going to be Mickey Hillstead. Obviously,
unless he picked 47.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Unless he picked it. Yeah, but maybe he did. He generally did. But I don't think this BYU team is going to be able to keep up what they did last season, because they are starting a true freshman at quarterback, and that's really hard to do. We saw it go sideways for Utah. Also, I think that spring ball reps are very valuable. Like, I know that we see guys transfer and they'll work out with the receivers in the offseason, but I really believe there is something to be said about that month you get to your team practicing and going over things. And that's something that Bear missed out on. I think that's a big loss for him. There's questions at both offensive tackle spots for this BYU team. Chase Roberts is an amazing wideout. Who are the second and third best guy? There's guys who have shown flashes, none of them over 300 yards in a season collegiately too. Also a ton new on defense. This is a BYU team that thrived in those very razor-thin margins last season. Lots of one-score wins. To me, BYU is an obvious regression candidate. I already wasn't sure they would be able to repeat last year's success just because of some of the ways they won. But look, Jake Retzloff wasn't this top 10 college football quarterback in general. But to me, he was a top 10 quarterback in the Big 12. And I believe it's a loss to have him. And there are growing pains with the true freshman. You know, Dylan Raiola was able to help Nebraska get to a bowl game, but he had a very rocky rookie year too, and that was a 5-star as well. So I'm just not high on BYU this year. I think that they will be competitive. I think they make some things happen. You know, they got Stanford on the schedule, so they're definitely still making a bowl game. But I don't see this as a team that is contending for the Big 12 like they did last year. Love Kalani Sitake. They have a lot of positive things going for them, but they have questions in some of the most important positions in football to me. So when so many other Big 12 teams have answers there, and especially the great answers at quarterback, I don't see how I could pick BYU to be a top 4 team like they were a year ago.
What you brought up there too about just the practice reps and the spring reps, I think that's going to be a very interesting thing even to see too in the first game that Utah's playing this year, because they're playing UCLA, who's got Nico, who obviously made one of the stories of the offseason where he leaves Tennessee in the middle of the night, basically, and heads over to UCLA. And then it's like a weird trade where all of a sudden Tennessee gets UCLA's quarterback, who was the App State transfer, who transferred to UCLA and then to Tennessee. So I could see something like week 1 happening where Kyle Whittingham's giving UCLA and Nico Iamaleava fits, and then all of a sudden on the other side in Atlanta in the Tennessee-Syracuse game, maybe Tennessee is just all of a sudden lighting up Syracuse. But we got a lot. Yeah, definitely. So you thinking Big 12 title this year for Utah? This will be the last question I have. You thinking Big 12 title? We going back to it? First Big 12 title for Utah this year, at least making a trip to Arlington?
I am, James. I like this Utah team. I like what they've been able to do. It is a tough schedule in terms of the teams that Utah must play. But the way it's broken up, I actually think is very favorable. Utah doesn't go back-to-back on the road, buy games, fall at a good time. I think that last 3-game stretch of the season is the toughest, in my opinion. You got Kansas State, Baylor, and Kansas. But if you're Utah and you're playing your best football at that point, I think you should be able to go in there and win 2 of those 3. This is a Utah team. When they have had their projected starting quarterback, the guy they wanted to start at quarterback from the start of the season as their guy, they have not lost a home game since 2017. They lost a bunch last year with a backup. Even in 23, when they were ranked and Oregon came there, Bryson Barnes was a backup quarterback. So there's just not many teams in college football that can say that. I understand that's a huge caveat, but it's still just true that this Utah team is really hard to beat at home. And they've answered. There's just no way to me Utah doesn't have an improved quarterback in the class. Does that mean they end up in Arlington? No, not by itself. But I believe in Devin Dampier. I think he's shown some special flashes. And a year or 2 with Jason Beck will be great for him. Talked about this offensive line, and this Utah defense has so much coming back I like. Yeah, questions at the defensive line. I think it's one of the best linebacker groups in the Big 12, and that's saying something. There's some really good linebackers in the Big 12. Secondary loaded with talent too. Utah has one of the best safety duos in the Big 12. Smith Snowden, one of the best corners in the Big 12 conference too. It's a lot this team is going for them. I think coaching is going to be one of them. Utah gets some of the toughest teams they play at home too, right? Arizona State, Kansas State, as well as Texas Tech to open Big 12 play. Also, one thing I think that helps Utah scheduling wise is, to me, when's the best time to play at UCLA? You brought them up because of a lot of the new factors. Like, to me, game one. Like, I'm very happy that Utah's playing them game one. How about Texas Tech? I'd rather play them the first game of Big 12 play than the last one while they try to figure out those transfer portal additions, including having to replace their star running back now too, right? So I think this schedule really breaks well for Utah. I like the middle as the season. It acts as somewhat of a break. Like, BYU is still going to be a tough test. Of course, it's a rivalry game. It's always close, but that's where I just feel the absence of Jake Retzloff and just a proven quarterback will be the difference there, and Dampier is going to make enough plays. So I like this Utah team. I got them at 10-2 this season. I have them in Arlington. And James, I have them winning the Big 12 crown this year too, and sending out Kyle Whittingham like they were hoping to.
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought up too. I don't think a lot of people realize, unless you were a Pac-12 school, the last decade or so, that Utah is one of the best home field advantage in the entire sport. Just playing there at night is incredibly scary, and that's why I'm glad Iowa State played them last year with a backup quarterback. So, JT, thank you so much for coming on. Do you want to tell us where we can find all of your work, and then we'll head out of here?
Yeah, greatly appreciate you having me on, James. You guys can find me at Locked On Utes on YouTube Monday through Friday, on X as well, at JT Wistersill, or at Locked On Utes there. Talking all things Utes all week long. Thanks again, James.
Awesome. Thank you so much, JT. And yeah, if you're out there watching this right now, you're still with us, make sure you hit like, make sure you hit subscribe, leave your predictions of what you think Utah season's going to be like. Other Big 12 predictions. Who do you think is going to win the conference? Who do you think Utah could be beating or playing in the Big 12 title game? And thank you very much for watching. We'll talk to you next time.